Eyes opened when and why then? Reflections upon the scriptures and the Eucharist as two pillars of the Christian life. In the Gospel of Luke, chapter 24, verses 13 to 35, we have a beautiful narration of an important event that reveals several sublime truths. We can indeed derive lots of lessons and insights from the journey of the disciples from Jerusalem to Emmaus. They go in a confused and frustrated mindset. Confused because they could not believe the women who claimed about the empty tomb and the message from the angels about Jesus' resurrection. That news was perhaps too joyful and desirable for them that they could not believe it, though at the heart of their hearts they must have wished it to be very true. That is why they were confused. Similarly, they were frustrated because all their hopes on Jesus were shattered, especially the hope that he could liberate the Israelites. When Jesus was crucified on the cross, therefore, it was not just Jesus, but along with him, their dear hopes were also crucified. When they lost hopes, naturally, they lost meaning in their lives as well. So the disciples on their journey to Emmaus were in a state of mind for whom there was no future nor any meaning in life. But as the narration goes, they themselves experienced the risen Jesus. They walked with him, spoke to him, stayed with him, prayed with him, and participated in the breaking of the bread. The most interesting thing to note is that when the stranger Jesus explains all the prophets, starting from Moses, and how the Messiah would fulfill God's plans of salvation, their eyes did not open. In fact, Jesus was surprised at their unpreparedness to believe what is said in the scriptures regarding the Messiah. He was even irritated and openly expressed his annoyance with them. In verse 25, we read, "He said to them, 'How foolish you are, and how slow to believe all that the prophets have spoken.'" One may now wonder how those disciples tolerated a stranger, a sojourner, who just joined them on the way to rebuke them as fools. They did not react to his reprimanding and harsh words because perhaps some sort of transformation must have already started in their minds and hearts. Realization and recognition of Jesus was a process. The scriptures paved the way, equipped them intellectually, clarified the concepts, explained, narrated the prophecies. It certainly prepared them to understand the truth, but still their eyes were not opened at that point. Their eyes were opened only when Jesus broke the bread at table. Breaking of the bread, that is was a last event that Jesus did together with his apostles. It was, so to say, the climax of his whole life. During the Last Supper on the Maundy Thursday, he symbolically or sacramentally gave himself to them in the form of bread and wine, but on the next day, the Good Friday, he literally and physically gave his body and every drop of blood on the cross. He himself became the sacrificial victim as well as the one who offered the sacrifice, and obviously the cross on the top of Calvary became the sacrificial table. His sacrifice was so powerful that there was no need to repeat it. His one sacrifice was so perfect that it became the final and absolute. Unlike the sacrifices performed by the priests of the earlier times, they offered sacrificial animals as a reparation of their sins. They used the sacrificial table made of stones, but Jesus' sacrifice became once and for all, precisely because he was both the sacrificial animal and the one who performed the sacrifice. That is why the letter to the Hebrews declares in clear terms, and every priest stands daily at his service, offering repeatedly the same sacrifices which can never take away sins. But when Christ had offered for all time a single sacrifice for sins, he sat down at the right hand of God, waiting from that time until his enemies should be made a footstool for his feet. For by a single offering he has perfected for all time those who are being sanctified. Letter to the Hebrews chapter 10 verses 11 to 14. Jesus' crucifixion on the cross was not an accident, but a systematically planned out, a deliberate murder. The horrifying agony on the cross was a result of the choice that Jesus made in his life. Had he decided to live like any other young Jewish man of his times, he perhaps would have lived longer, probably with a family and his children of his own, but the world would have forgotten him long before. Today, after 2000 years, we would not be remembering him and adoring him. The Eucharist is a sacramental presentation at the altar of the physical sacrifice of Jesus on the Calvary. The Eucharist is a great reminder of that sacrifice and a serious invitation to us to choose the path that Jesus took in his life. The Eucharist is the highest form of his presence. It's a fulfillment, so to say, of all the prophecies and the predictions of the great sacrifice of the suffering Messiah. That is why it was quite right and natural that the eyes of those disciples on the way to Emmaus were opened at the breaking of the bread, though their hearts were gradually prepared earlier by the breaking of the word. The Eucharist has unfortunately today become just another sacred object kept in the church. We have become insensitive to the demanding presence of Jesus in the Eucharist. It's a challenging presence. Eucharist is not only consoling but also challenging. It's not only healing but also disturbing. When we look at it, it challenges us to choose the path as Jesus chose in his life. Some of the challenges are as follows. When I tend to be furious, the Eucharist asks me to forgive. When I am afraid and try to withdraw, the Jesus in the Eucharist tells me, take courage and go forward. When I have doubts, he gently touches me saying, have confidence. When I feel restless, he tells me, be calm. When I prefer to go on my own way, he commands me, come and follow me. When I set my own plans, he shocks me by saying, forget about them. When I fight for the material goods, he says, leave them behind. When I want security in my life, he says, I promise you absolutely nothing. When I like to live my own life, he tells me, give up your life. When I like to command others, he tells me, obey. When I like to boss over others, he invites me to serve. When I try to understand with my brains, he tells me, believe with your heart. When I like clarity, he speaks to me in parables. When I like poetry, he speaks to me of realities in plain words. When I like to preserve my tranquility, he likes that I am disturbed. When I go in for violent reactions, He says, "Peace be with you." When I draw my sword, He orders me, "Put that away." When I think of revenge, He challenges me, saying, "Offer your other cheek." When I choose hatred, He says, "Love your enemies." When I go in for compromises, He says, "I have come to cast fire on earth." When I like to remain hidden, He demands that I let my light shine. When I eagerly look for the first place and the best place, He directs me to sit in the last bench. When I try hard to be the greatest, He says, "Learn how to be as little as a child." When I like my spirituality to be noticed, the Eucharist gently whispers into my ears, "Pray in your room behind the locked doors." It's more likely that our eyes are open at the Eucharist, though the scriptures certainly enlighten us. Once our eyes are open, we cannot but get into action, as the disciples of Emmaus made a U turn to go back to Jerusalem to proclaim the good news. Let's therefore allow ourselves to be enlightened by the scriptures, allow our eyes to be opened by the Eucharist, and allow ourselves to be challenged by the demanding presence of Jesus in the Eucharist.